So, Mr. Niv, I have heard that you used to live in Oxford.
Yeah, I lived in Cutslow. So if Oxford's a clock, that would be number 12, up near the north of the city. Loved it.
Okay, amazing. Big up, Cutslow.
Do you know, there was literally a wall dividing Cutslow from, like, proper rich Oxford.
Oh, wow.
And they took it down in the late 20th century, but there literally was a wall. And so if you've ever watched Parks and Recreation, where Pawnee and Eagleton are separated by a wall, you can watch that and be like, that happened in Oxford, because it did.
Wow, crazy. Down with the wall. Okay, cool. So, you know a bit of the Oxford terrain, and my question for you is, what was your favorite coffee shop to frequent?
I love how original the questions are.
Exactly, I came up with that myself.
I used to love, I don't know how you pronounce it, I call it Olenstein, because I love coffee, but I'm also a big fan of cinnamon-based food, and their cinnamon social slice is just next level. So I love that, yeah.
Brilliant, amazing. All right, cool. I think I'm going to allow you to get on with your talk. So don't mind me, I'm just going to depart this way.
Well, now I have your permission. That's great.
Cool, right, enjoy your talk.
Thanks so much. Amazing. I loved it. I met James earlier today, and I was like, I'm sure you're going to be brilliant. But I did not know how brilliant. So delightful. Well done, the hosts. Great to be here for Home. Thank you so much for coming along. And all through this week, we're going to be thinking together through some of the big questions we have about what kind of home we can make of the world. So thank you so much for being here. And there is that QR code for Slido. So as we go through, please feel free to look at it, ask some questions. We'll have a little bit of Q&A afterwards as well. Thank you so much for coming. Thought I'd begin by telling you a little bit about my family. I have two daughters. Maria is the younger one, Rafi is the old one. There's a picture of Maria coming up in a second. She is stunningly beautiful. You know, if I can take, 50% credit? Is that what Mendelian genetics tell us? Anyway, she's wonderful. She's 10 months old. And about 4 months ago, she started making delightful babbling noises. And her favorite babbling noise was she would say, da, 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 da. It was lovely. She wasn't saying daddy. She wasn't saying dada. And I wasn't going to pretend she was, because that would have been politically disastrous. You do not want to say that your child has decided to say dada before she's decided to say mama. That would not have gone down well at home. So, dada, that's da, 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 just noises. And then a couple of months ago, something remarkable started happening. Maria would look at me in the eyes, and say, dada. Not da 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 da, but dada, addressing me, naming me. What happened there? A noise had become a word. Meaning had entered the picture. Communication was now possible. And where there's communication, there can be learning about the other person. There can be relationship. There can be love. Maria, as she reached out to me, named me, spoke to me, was finding her place in our home. And I hasten to add, she is also saying mama to her mother. So, you know, she's not playing favorites, which is very diplomatic of her. She was finding her place in the home. And of course, she's always had one. Even before she arrived, we were ready for her. And we were telling her older sister all about her getting things ready. But now as she's speaking, as she's engaging with us, as she's reaching out, she's trying to find her place in our home. Find her place generally. Home is our theme all through this week. Because all of us are like Maria, reaching out into the world, trying to find a home. So many of our greatest stories are stories about going home. Take Odysseus. That story of his travels, cyclopses, sorceresses, and all, is just a story about him trying to get back home. Or Bilbo Baggins. He finds himself thrust on an adventure he hadn't particularly initiated, and yet, even though he develops a taste for exploration, when he writes the story, he calls it There and Back Again. And the back again bit is important. Because no matter how far we go, we want to feel like we can go back somewhere where we belong. All of us are looking for a home. All of us are looking for somewhere where we make sense. Looking for a place where we fit in. Looking for a community that we are proud to belong to. all of us have a longing for home. Can that longing be satisfied? Or is it one that will always be frustrated? Or to come at the question from another direction, is reality hospitable to us? Is finding a home in this world a matter of just cutting with the grain of a world where we really belong, finding harmony with it? Or is it more like carving out a shelter in a fundamentally hostile space? Can we ever find a home? All of these are questions of meaning, questions we ask as we try to place ourselves in reality and understand ourselves better. Questions of meaning. When noises become words and meaning enters the picture and words become questions, especially the question, why, all of us are reaching out to find our place. Here is a question from someone doing that. It's a question from Professor Stephen Hawking and the end of his A Brief History of Time, a book that I have read, but I'm not confident I fully understood most of it, to be honest, what with my English degree, anyway. But I did understand this last bit, sort of. He says that a possible unified theory, it is just a set of rules and equations. What is it that breathes fire into the equations and makes a universe for them to describe? Why does the universe go to all the bother of existing? It's a question you ask as you try to find your place in the world. And it's a question you might be asking in all kinds of other ways. And there are all sorts of answers on offer. Let me share you an answer that I think is quite popular in the 21st century West. And again, it's from Stephen Hawking. This time, it's more of a comment than a question. He said this once in an interview. The human race is just a chemical scum on a moderate-sized planet orbiting around a very average star in the outer suburb of one among 100 billion galaxies. We are so insignificant that I cannot believe that the whole universe exists for our benefit. What's our place in the world? Well, we've got one, but it's not a privileged place. We're just a chemical scum. Is that how you feel as you look around the room? Look at all this chemical scum that we've gathered together. And yet, this is Stephen Hawking telling us this. So it sounds like someone who's at the apex of modern science, and just consider all the other questions science is so adept at answering. And we'll think a lot about that tomorrow at lunchtime, so come back to dig into that topic especially. But it sounds like that's where modern science leaves us, looking in the mirror and thinking, hello you, chemical scum. Is that something we can live with? Well, that's one of the answers that we are given. And when we take God out of the picture, as our society more or less has done, we are left with a universe of time, matter, chance, and nothing else. And in that universe, the only place we can find is one in which we are chemical scum. Any and all of the meaning we are seeking is not meaning that is out there to discover, but meaning that we have invented, meaning that we've come up with for ourselves, a fig leaf of significance covering over the obvious. But you know, there are other ways of looking at human beings in the vastness of the universe. One of my favorite living novelists is Marilyn Robinson, and she wrote this in one of her essays. Say that we are a puff of warm breath in a very cold universe. By this kind of reckoning, we are either immeasurably insignificant or we are incalculably precious and interesting. I tend towards the second view. Scarcity is said to create value after all. Of course, value is a meaningful concept only where there is relationship, someone to do the valuing. And I guess that's one of the questions we're asking this week. Is there someone to do the valuing? Not just us, but someone to do the valuing on a cosmic scale. Because if there were, not only would we necessarily be more than just a chemical scum, but it would be possible for us to find our home in the world. It would be possible for us to find our place in reality. There is another answer to the question of what a human being is and what a human being is worth than just a chemical scum. It's an answer which has proven hospitable to the development of science as we know it, that has nurtured the ideals of freedom and equality and dignity that we cherish today, and in fact has been their only source in history. It is an answer that is changing lives, as it has done for the past 20 centuries, such that millions of people today, and counting, stake everything on it. And it is the answer that this week we at the Christian Union are inviting you to dig into for yourself, to see whether this answer can change things for you in the world. So, can I ask you to grab these books on your table? Could you grab it and pick it up? Because in a moment, David is going to come. Come on up, David, and read it from us. And do open up to the very beginning. A very good place to start. It doesn't even have a page number, because it's just the beginning. It'll say John. Now, just before David reads, something for us to consider. This is a book called John's Gospel, and it's part of the Bible. And so Christians like me consider it the Word of God. But of course, if you're here just looking in, that isn't something that you would think. And I understand that. But here's the thing. This is a first century text with a strong claim to offer us eyewitness evidence about things that have changed the world. So while Christians may believe that this is more than history, it is not less than history. Whatever your convictions, whatever you currently think, I invite you to dig into this evidence on those terms, as we have it read in a moment. Take it away, David.
Thank you. So the reading is from John chapter 1, verses 1 to 14. So that would be up until the superscript 15 in the book. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God, whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth.
Thanks, David. And do keep those open as we look at those words, famous and remarkable words. And they tell us there, in the beginning was the Word. Not just noises and meaningless sounds, but the Word, which gives everything in our universe meaning. The Greek word for word is logos. But that word is slightly more than just a word you might write down or say. In fact, that word was the way the ancients would ask their questions that Stephen Hawking was asking. Stephen Hawking asked, what breathes fire into the equations? He's asking the question, what is the rational principle underlying everything? What is the theory of everything? And the ancients would have asked that question like this: what is the logos? What is the thing around which reality coheres, the thing that underlines everything and makes it all make sense? So John is speaking their language. And actually, probably an ancient philosopher might have been reading along and nodding at the beginning of that reading. The Word, in the beginning, everything made through this Word. But pretty soon there would have been consternation, perplexity. This reading takes things in a very unexpected direction because it becomes clear that the Word we're talking about is a person. This is what the French atheist philosopher Luc Ferry calls the personalizing of the logos. In other words, talking about the logos, the theory of everything, not just as a kind of impersonal, abstract theory, but as a person. And he says this changes all the factors in the equation. He's, as I say, a secular humanist looking at the history of thought, tracing how we got the ideas we cherish today. And what's so interesting is, though he's not himself a religious believer, he pinpoints Christianity as what he calls the birth of the modern idea of the human, of humanity. It turns out the Logos is not just an abstract theory or a mysterious force. The Logos is a person. He's the one who breathes fire into the equation. He's the one in whom everything hangs together. So that at the heart of reality is not just abstract theories or impersonal forces or meaninglessness grinding towards entropy, but a person who knows us and calls us to know him. I don't know if any of you are fans of the Jaws films about a big shark, and it does what you'd expect sharks to do. The fourth Jaws film, Jaws 4, had this tagline: "This time, it's personal," which is remarkable because it means the first time the shark ate all those people, nobody took it personally. It's extraordinary, isn't it? To be like, oh, well, oh, sorry, we shouldn't be swimming, I suppose. John's Gospel disagrees with Jaws 4. It's always been personal. Right back to the beginning of the universe and before, it's been personal. Because the beginning of all things is this Word who was with God and who was God, who made all things. That's what we read in that verse, that small sentence, verse 3. All things were made through him. Without him, nothing made that has been made. As we keep going, we see that in him is life. And that life is what lights up humanity. It is the light of life. Because that's true, by the way, you are not just a chemical scum. You were made by this Word, by this God, for him. And because that's true, that is why none of us actually live as if we are chemical scum. Even if you believe that, even if you've taken God way out of the picture, do you really live like that? Stephen Hawking's the one who said it. Would you look at his life and think that chemical scum was the right lens through which to look at his tremendous achievements? I wouldn't. None of us live that way. None of us treat one another like that. Let's have a little worked example. Think about the question of human value and dignity and what makes you meaningful. I think all of us, I'm sure, would agree that each human being has an inviolable dignity, and all human beings are equal, such that we would be scandalized if any factor, race, gender, anything else, became a reason to consider some human beings worth intrinsically more than others. We would hate that, wouldn't we? But what happens if you do take God out of the picture, if you do drop this answer and say that we are just a chemical scum? Can you really affirm human equality? Can you really speak about human dignity? What would that mean in a world of chemical scum? The writer Yuval Noah Harari is a historian, and he wrote a book called Sapiens, which was phenomenally successful. I don't agree with all of it by any means. But he narrowed down this question and articulated it really sharply when he said this: according to the science of biology, people were not created, they have evolved. And they certainly did not evolve to be equal. If meaning goes no further than we do, if we got here through a process of chance, evolution by natural selection, with no outside purpose ordering that, then that's where you're left with. How on earth could you say that we are equal in any meaningful sense, in any sense bigger than the four walls of our opinion? Or as the writer William S. Burroughs put it, evolution did not come to a reverent halt with Homo sapiens. So why do we act as if it did? And all of us do when we value one another. All of us do when we make equality a bedrock for how we live. And maybe you're thinking, look, this is a bit heavy for a Monday night. Maybe there's no objective proof for human rights, but why don't we just, accept it and do our best? To which I'd want to say, firstly, how incurious. You're thinking people, and you can do better than that. But secondly, how tragic. Because if it's true that all we are is chemical scum, then what we're saying is that none of the things we care about most exist in reality. love, hope, beauty, identity, justice. All of these things are a thin veneer. Push into them, and they fade away. The reality they mask is much, much bleaker. And these are just words we're throwing out there. Da, 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 da. Instead of really connecting and naming something real. How tragic. And thirdly, can I say, how ironic? Because when I was an atheist, I used to think the problem with religious people is that they would believe things that they could never prove and use it as a crutch through life to get them through their problems. But it turns out that is exactly what we're doing. If we take God out of the picture, say we're just a chemical scum, and then continue to believe that words like right and wrong mean something real. Words like true and false mean something real. I think we can do better than that. Because the Logos is at the heart of reality, and because he is the one that we're reading about here, meaning is not ultimately something that we are inventing. It is something that is out there to be discovered, to be known. And therefore, of course, you're right to value human equality. Of course, the dignity of other people should be inviolable. Of course, any kind of discrimination is wrong, properly, objectively wrong. Those are intuitions. This answer tells you you can trust, and you're not a fool to live as if they matter. There is no higher endorsement of human dignity than what we just had read earlier. Have a look down at the end of that reading. Verse 14. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. That's the sentence that the ancient philosopher would probably have found absurd / ridiculous / offensive. The idea that the Logos, the theory of everything, should somehow sully himself, with the mess and muck of bodily existence, with flesh. And yet that is the story which changed reality and set the course of history in ways that we live with today. Telling us that the Logos did not keep his distance from us, but stepped into this world with all of the muck and the mess, and came to us as one of us. Not just content to play riddles in the dark with enough for us to wonder but nothing solid enough to go on, but stepping in so that you can bring your inquiring mind and you can bring your searching heart and see for yourself what you were made to know. Stepping in to real history. That, by the way, is why in verse 6 we read another John. Not John the writer, but John the Baptist, a phenomenally important first century figure who left a real impact and witnessed to Jesus in what he did. Jesus left a real impact on history. And this was the thing when I was an atheist that challenged me most. Let's think just a little bit about that impact together. Here's all Jesus had to work with. He was a homeless carpenter's son who only spent 3 years in the public eye. He wasn't in the Oxfords of the world, places of influence where the movers and shakers gather. He was in the Nowheresville, the backwaters of Galilee, a rump in the vast Roman Empire. He had a handful of followers, one of whom betrayed him, no money to spend, no armies to fight for him. And at the end of those 3 years, the grand climax, a brutal, humiliating execution on a Roman cross. That is all Jesus had to work with. And with that and nothing else, he has transformed our world like nobody in history. We even measure history around his life. Whatever you think of Jesus right now, surely you have to get to the bottom of that. Surely you have to make sense of that kind of impact on our world. The Word stepped into real history. And this is a claim no other philosophy or religion makes, that the Creator became part of his creation. The author of reality wrote himself into the story, didn't look at bodily existence and go, yuck, the way so many in the ancient world would have done, but came to take part in all of it, came to bear the heartaches and the indignity and the 1,000 shocks that flesh is heir to become just like us. because he wanted us. We are so used to disembodied ideas that work in theory but never in practice, aren't we? And I guess one of the dangers in a place like Oxford is you can vanish into the Radcliffe camera and study and think and have all these ideas that work so well up here, but wonder if you're ever making a difference out there. Or was that just me doing my theology degree? But it's true for all of us. And that is not what we're talking about when we talk about Jesus. We're talking about someone who stepped in, who made contact with real life in all of its mess to make a difference. Because Jesus is God showing his face, revealing himself so that people full of questions, people longing for home, can find their place at last. And John sums up what Jesus brings in two beautiful words. He says he's full of grace and truth. Grace, a generosity willing to be better to us than we deserve. And truth, the ability to show us reality as it really is, to take us beyond any of the illusions so that we can discover what's going on and what our place is. One way to describe what Jesus has come to do is to show us our place in reality by making us at home at last. And not just at home in the world, but at home with him. Have a look down at the reading again and the verse 10, the small 10. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision, nor a husband's will, but born of God. As we'll see all through this week, Jesus is so full of grace and truth, he even offers himself to those who reject him, those who refuse to recognize him or accept him, even though he made them. Which, by the way, is something all of us have done. All of us have found ways of doing that, whether dramatic and obvious ways or subtle and socially acceptable ways. All of us have held our Creator at arm's length and put ourselves in his place. But here's the thing. Jesus will meet that rejection with open arms. He will show us grace and truth. And he will bring us light and life, even though it plunges him into darkness and death to do it. That's what's on offer with him. Jesus became part of the human family to make us part of his. Chose to make our home his home, our problems his problems. And that tells you his priorities. If all God were interested in were your mind, he could just have left you theories and puzzles to solve. If all he was interested in was your good behavior, he could have just given you the rules you need to follow and left you at it. But as important as those things are, what he's really interested in is you. And so he gives you himself and comes to us as one of us. To go back to what Stephen Hawking said, of course the whole universe doesn't exist for your benefit, but the one for whose benefit it does exist values you this much, cares about you this much, and has stepped in, right in, to make all the difference. That's Jesus' claim. That's what we're unpacking through this week. That's what you have the opportunity to dig into. And I wonder what you make of it. I wonder where you're at right now. Could you please grab the response cards, those kind of like slightly big piece of paper on your table? Because I'd love us to have a chance to share where we're at, an opportunity for you to write how you are. There's anything you can put down there. You can say as much as you like, but I thought we could play a sort of cheeky little game in which you try to come up with 3 words at least to summarize where you are. No matter how you're feeling, no matter whether you're going to come to all the events, no matter what, please do just put down 3 words. They could be any 3 words. You could say something like, town hall's nice, or I like balloons. Equally, these could be words expressing how you found this claim you've engaged with. And it might be that your 3 words are, I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced. And if that's you, can I say thank you so much for being patient and listening? But here's a final question just for you. What if you could move from as if to because? What if instead of living as if there were meaning, truth, beauty, and goodness, You could move to living because there's meaning, truth, beauty, and goodness. You could live because those things are there, they're for real, and they're for you. What a difference that would make in your life. Wouldn't that change everything to know that the things you care about most aren't just a thin veneer, and when you press into them, you're getting closer and closer to the heart of things that count? Well, because Jesus, the Logos, has come to you to show you the face of God, that's something you can know and discover for yourself. Maybe your 3 words are, need more information, which makes lots of sense. This might be some of the first time you're thinking about some of these things. If that's you, please stick around. We're here all week digging into this claim. What I loved about Christianity when I started looking at it is that it's not just, despite how high I am up here, it is not 6 feet above contradiction. You are allowed to dig into it. As an atheist, when I investigated it, I found myself liberated by the fact that I could ask questions. Please do that this week. Take away this account of Jesus' life and read it for yourself. It's our gift to you. So take it and read it and see for yourself where it leads. See what's there. But can I just say, there's something more than intellectual assent required here. There's something more than facts and good historical evidence to grapple with here. Of course, there is all of that. But more is going on. See, what Jesus reveals is that the meaning we care about really is out there. But he also reveals that it doesn't stay out there. He stepped in. He's come to us, and he's offered himself to us. So there's much more to work out here than questions to puzzle over. There is the opportunity to come face to face with the one who made us. So yes, you can know that there's meaning. You can know that God exists, but there's so much more to discover. You can discover his love for you. You can experience his grace and truth and meet the one who is able to make sense of us in all our splendor and all our shame, able to deal with us in all we're going through, able to make us feel at home. And maybe tonight, your 3 words are, I want in. Yes, apparently I can have this, I want this. Great, if that's where you are. Because I don't know if you remember from the reading, but there was a promise in there in verse 12. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Jesus' promise is that he will give you the right to become part of his family. That's not a thing you have to do. That's not a thing you need spiritual brownie points for. It can be yours. And so I'm going to finish now with a prayer that anyone could pray to say yes to that and to become part of Jesus' family. That may not be where you are right now. That's completely fine. Just listen in if this is not a prayer you want to pray. But if as you've been looking at God's love for you, his desire to come close to you, to step down, all the way down for you, if you realize you want that for yourself, then feel free just to join in with this prayer I'm saying by echoing it along quietly in your heart. Why don't we be still for a moment and I'll pray that prayer. And like I say, if that's not where you are, that's fine. Let's pray. Jesus, you made me for yourself. I have lived with myself at the center instead. But I thank you for your grace and truth, stepping into the world and giving yourself up for me. I come to you now. I turn away from life with myself at the center, and I trust you. Please make me part of your family so that I might live knowing your grace and truth tonight. Amen. Thank you so much for listening to me. In a moment, we're going to have questions and answers. Do keep using the Slido to ask them. Why don't we take just a couple of minutes before the hosts come back to keep filling in our forms, keep sending in Slido questions, and I'm sure we'll be in their very capable hands before long. Thank you very much for listening.